My name is Lady Liberty, and today I'm going to be talking about double masking and the new way to test for the deadly respiratory disease known as COVID. Spoiler alert, it's an anal swab. So to start out with double masking, I thought and I hoped that this was a joke. So apparently, the enlightened Dr. Fauci says that it makes common sense to double mask, and then not even a week later says that there is no data that supports that theory.
If you have a physical covering with one layer, you put another layer on, it just makes common sense that it likely would be more effective.
There are many people who feel, if you really want to have an extra little bit of protection, maybe I should put two masks on. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's no data that indicates that that is going to make a difference. And that's the reason why the CDC has not changed their recommendation.
So, okay, I get it. People make mistakes and we say stupid things. But to call something common sense and then retract that statement is pretty extreme. To say that something only requires common sense is saying that you don't need extra knowledge on the subject because it's commonly known. For example, you wouldn't meet up with someone on the internet in a dark alley, or you wouldn't drive home while intoxicated, and you wouldn't speed right in front of a cop. These are all things that you do not need to do a research paper on because you can just use your common sense to realize they're bad ideas. They've already been proven, so they don't require further research. Maybe Fauci was onto something. I think to be on the safe side, we need to not only double our masks, but also place plastic bags over our heads, because plastic bubbles around our entire bodies would just be too much, and that idea is too extreme. But we can maintain some human interaction with plastic bags over our heads, because after all, hypoxia is not a thing. It does not exist. You do not need oxygen to maintain your brain cells. That has been fact-checked by our experts. You are welcome. But jokes aside, the fact that there are so many people out there who are double masking because they're so terrified of COVID is just sad. And if you're not someone who is actively trying to spread the fear of COVID, or if you're just not buying into the fear of COVID and you're not wearing a mask, you're shamed. I mean, how dare you not promote the deaths from COVID for more than 20 seconds? How dare you not consistently ingrain the fear into the minds of your viewers? And again, I said this in the Great Reset video, but look at all the different news sources that are bombarding people with how many people have been infected with COVID, but even more so, how many people have died from COVID. But none of them talk about the actual survival rates, only how many people have died. And just for the hell of it, I randomly decided to look up breast cancer. And lo and behold, it's pretty easy to not only find websites that talk about survival, but they also include the survival rates. Now, I'm going to show you some numbers that are from the World Health Organization that include the number of confirmed COVID cases and confirmed deaths. And I've looked at other websites too that are talking about COVID infections and deaths, and they all, when you do the math, come out to about a 98% survival rate. And a lot of people use condoms when they have sex, and they also are 98% effective when used correctly. And many people like those odds, so they continue to use condoms. Now, my point is, the mainstream media is promoting fear because that's what the globalists and the elite want them to do. And I'll be preaching that until the day I die, or until the day that we wake up and America is a communist country, in which at that point I'll say, I told you so. But anyways, moving on, China has been using anal swabs to detect COVID. And yes, you heard that right. One news source says that anal testing is being used so far on only select groups, mainly high-risk cases and people in quarantine. Some people have been subjected to anal testing include passengers arriving in Beijing and a group of 1,000 school children and teachers who were thought to have been exposed to the virus. So in this case, they're using the term high risk in the sense of people who are more likely to contract COVID because they're around more people. But the actual definition of someone who is at high risk by the CDC is someone who's either obese, has heart disease, diabetes, lung disease, basically any type of health issue that can make it harder for your body to fight the virus. And as we know, most children are not healthy. Most children do not look like this. These are Photoshopped children. They are not real. This is what real children look like. And do not fear, we fact-checked a healthy weight for a child for you. You are welcome. Now, continuing on, they claim that the anal swabs are more accurate because the virus lives longer in the anus. Yet we all know that COVID is a respiratory disease. So it makes perfect sense to get an anal swab to ensure that your lungs are a-okay. Because we all know that if you have C. diff, for example, the doctor is going to auscultate your lungs. It's quite obviously the obvious thing to do. But I also want to point out that the CDC says that you can be around other people 10 days after your first symptoms appear, as long as you don't have a fever and other symptoms are improving. This means you're still going to have symptoms, but they're just going to be getting better. Yet the CDC also said that you can continue to test positive for COVID for up to 3 months without actually being contagious. So for a second, let's just say, theoretically, the anal swabs are good indicators of having COVID. But how does that help even if you test positive and you're asymptomatic when you can test positive for COVID for up to 3 months after having it, but you're not contagious? And this is where I come back to the whole idea of COVID producing fear, and this fear making people more compliant with what the government says, even if it doesn't make sense. Because, think about it. When someone holds a knife to your throat, they do that to make you afraid, to make you compliant. And in this case, the knife is the fear of COVID. And I would bet my life that there are people in this country that are so stupid that they would happily, bend over and get these anal swabs. And the thing is, when you look at their numbers and you do the math, there's a 2% chance you'll die from COVID. And we know that the people who did die from COVID had underlying conditions, and they were what was considered high risk. And this is why that they don't talk about survival rates, because as soon as they do, it's going to start clicking for the people who still believe this shit. And it's going to stop spreading as much fear. See, the thing is, talking about survival rates for the media would be the equivalent of having that knife to your throat, but then saying, I'm not going to hurt you, so the fear of that knife slicing your throat open goes away. So, again, why does it make sense to shut down the entire economy and ruin people's lives for the sake of caring for our community? And here's the thing, I'm all for caring about the community, but that includes small businesses, that includes schools, families, and it includes their quality of life, not just the fact that they're alive. And when you consider that a person really only has a chance of dying from COVID when they already have these extreme health issues, it should really make you question why the government shut everything down rather than informing people on who is considered high risk and then telling them that if you're high risk, here's the steps you can take to reduce your risk of getting COVID and dying from COVID. Now, if you happen to watch my video about the Great Reset, or you've seen the videos promoting the Great Reset posted by the World Economic Forum or the Royal Family, I'm just going to leave this here because I found it while I was looking around, researching, and I'm sure we are going to be hearing a lot of this shit from many people for the years to come. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and please remember, God gave us free will, and many people have died to preserve our freedom to exercise that free will.